Part 1. The Zephyrian hunting fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere like silver daggers cutting through clouds. Admiral Kexthul watched the blue planet grow larger on his view screen, mandibles clicking in amusement. Intelligence reports scattered across his command console showed primitive human weaponry, crude projectile launchers, chemical explosives, and metal projectiles fired by expanding gases. How wonderfully backward. Begin the hunt protocol, Kexthul commanded, his four arms manipulating holographic displays with practiced ease. Around him, the bridge of the flagship Apex Predator hummed with activity as crew members prepared for what they considered a routine culling operation. The Zephyrians had perfected hunting across 17 star systems. They were apex predators from a world where evolution had crafted them into perfect killers, 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor that could deflect most energy weapons, with reflexes faster than any known species. Their technology reflected their nature: plasma rifles that could melt through steel, personal shield generators, and hunting armor that made them nearly invulnerable to primitive attacks. Captain Vexmore, Kexthul's second-in-command, pulled up tactical displays showing major human population centers. The prey has gathered in large clusters called cities, she reported, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of her species. Our scouts report they use projectile weapons that fire small metal fragments at subsonic speeds. Laughably primitive. The hunting fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each carrying 50 of the galaxy's most elite hunters. The Zephyrians had turned warfare into an art form, and humans were merely the latest canvas for their masterpiece. Previous hunts had taken them to worlds inhabited by the crystalline Vorthan Empire, where they'd collected exotic crystal formations as trophies, and the gas giant colonies of the Nebular Collective, where they'd hunted the floating jellyfish-like inhabitants through methane clouds. Earth, however, promised to be different. The humans had shown remarkable aggression in their brief contact with galactic civilization, but their technology remained centuries behind even the most basic interstellar standards. It would be like hunting primitive beasts with plasma cannons. Deploy hunting pods to major population centers, Kexthul ordered. Begin with what their transmissions call New York, London, Tokyo, and Berlin. I want terror to spread before we begin the true hunt. The hunting pods, sleek, predatory vessels designed for atmospheric combat, launched from the motherships like angry hornets. Each pod carried a pack of 5 hunters, equipped with the finest weapons Zephyrian technology could provide. Their plan was simple: land in populated areas, eliminate any organized resistance, and begin the systematic hunting of humans for sport. As the first pods breached the upper atmosphere, human military installations worldwide detected the incoming threat. Radar operators in NORAD deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain watched in growing alarm as their screens filled with unidentified contacts moving at impossible speeds. Fighter jets scrambled from airbases across the globe, their pilots knowing they faced something beyond their understanding, but determined to defend their world. The first engagement occurred over the English Channel. RAF Typhoon fighters intercepted a hunting pod approaching London, their pilots maintaining radio discipline despite the fear in their voices. Squadron leader James Mitchell led the formation, his aircraft loaded with the most advanced air-to-air missiles in the British arsenal. Bandit in sight, Mitchell reported, watching the alien craft through his canopy. It was unlike anything in human design. Organic curves blended with technological precision, moving with an almost predatory grace that made his skin crawl. Fox 3, he called, launching an AMRA missile at the target. The advanced missile streaked toward the hunting pod, its sophisticated guidance system locked onto the alien vessel. For a moment, hope flared in Mitchell's chest. The hunting pod's defensive systems activated with casual efficiency. A pulse of directed electromagnetic energy scrambled the missile's guidance, sending it spiraling harmlessly into the ocean below. Then the pod returned fire. The Zephyrian plasma cannon unleashed a bolt of superheated energy that vaporized Mitchell's Typhoon in an instant. His wingmen watched in horror as their squadron leader simply ceased to exist, leaving only expanding gases where his aircraft had been seconds before. Similar scenes played out across the globe. F-22 Raptors, considered the pinnacle of human aerospace engineering, were swatted from the skies like insects. Surface-to-air missiles either missed their impossibly agile targets or were neutralized by alien countermeasures that operated on principles human science barely understood. In the Pentagon's War Room, General Patricia Hayes watched satellite feeds showing the systematic destruction of Earth's air defenses. Stealth technology, electronic warfare suites, and advanced radar systems. All the technological advantages that had defined modern warfare proved utterly useless against alien technology that operated centuries beyond human understanding. "They're not even trying," she muttered, watching an entire squadron of F-35s eliminated in less than 30 seconds. "It's like they're playing with us." That assessment was more accurate than she realized. Aboard the Apex Predator, Admiral Kexthal monitored the engagements with growing satisfaction. The humans showed admirable courage, throwing their primitive aircraft against obviously superior technology, but courage without capability was merely amusing. "Their flying machines are impressively designed for such a primitive species," Captain Vexmore observed, watching the tactical feeds. "But their weapons cannot even penetrate our basic defensive fields." The first hunting pods touched down in major cities worldwide. In Times Square, civilians screamed and fled as a sleek craft settled onto the asphalt with predatory grace. Its hull split open like a blooming flower of death, revealing 5 Zephyrian hunters in their full armor. The hunters emerged with the confidence of apex predators. Their armor gleamed with an inner light, personal shield generators creating barely visible distortions around their forms. Plasma rifles charged with deadly energy as they surveyed the fleeing humans with professional interest. New York Police Department officers arrived within minutes, their vehicles skidding to stops behind concrete barriers. Lieutenant Mike Santos had 20 years of experience dealing with every kind of urban crisis, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "NYPD, drop your weapons," he shouted through a megaphone, knowing even as he spoke how absurd the command sounded. The aliens towered over human proportions, their chitinous armor reflecting the neon lights of the city in disturbing patterns. The lead hunter turned toward the police barricade with what might have been curiosity. Santos could see intelligence in those multifaceted eyes, along with something that chilled him to the bone: amusement. The creature raised its plasma rifle with casual precision. "Take cover," Santos screamed, diving behind a police cruiser as superheated energy tore through concrete and steel like tissue paper. The barricade that had taken his officers precious minutes to construct vanished in moments, replaced by glowing slag and the acrid smell of vaporized matter. Similar scenes unfolded across the globe. In London, the Royal Marines' most elite units found their assault rifles useless against alien personal shields. In Tokyo, the Japanese self-defense forces watched their most advanced tanks reduced to molten metal by weapons that seemed to violate every law of physics they understood. The Zephyrians moved through human resistance like water flowing around stones. They weren't even serious about the fighting. This was just clearing the field before the real hunt began. Their true prey wasn't the military forces desperately trying to stop them, but the billions of civilians who represented the greatest hunting challenge the galaxy had to offer. As night fell over a world under siege, Admiral Kexthal reviewed the day's progress with deep satisfaction. Human resistance had been exactly as pathetic as predicted. Their weapons were primitive, their tactics predictable, and their technology laughably obsolete. "Begin Phase 2, he commanded. "Deploy additional hunting packs to rural areas. I want to test human survival instincts in their natural environments before we begin the formal hunting season." But even as the Zephyrians celebrated their easy victory, deep in the mountains of Afghanistan, a figure watched the alien ships through the scope of a rifle that had been crafted with precision unknown to galactic databases. Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez adjusted her position slightly, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of a weapon that alien scanners had dismissed as harmlessly primitive. The hunt was about to become far more interesting than Admiral Kexthal anticipated. Part 2, Elena Vasquez had been hunting since she could hold her father's old Winchester. Growing up in rural Montana, she'd learned patience from tracking elk through winter storms and precision from her grandfather's stories about Korean War sniping. The Army had refined her skills, but the mountains of Afghanistan had perfected them into something approaching art. Now, crouched in a hide she'd constructed in the Hindu Kush 2 days before the aliens arrived. She watched through her scope as a Zephyrian hunting pack moved through the valley below. They walked with the confident swagger of apex predators, their advanced armor gleaming in the harsh mountain sunlight. Elena's rifle was a custom-built piece that wouldn't look out of place in any gun shop back home. The alien scanners had detected it and dismissed it as exactly what their databases expected, a primitive chemical propulsion weapon firing basic metal projectiles. They were right, technically speaking. What their databases failed to account for was human ingenuity applied to the ancient art of precision shooting. The bullet in Elena's chamber wasn't standard military issue. It had been handcrafted by a retired NASA metallurgist named Dr. Robert Shun, who'd spent his career working with materials designed to survive re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. When the aliens arrived and conventional weapons proved useless, Chen had applied his knowledge to a different problem: how to punch through energy shields using materials and principles the aliens wouldn't expect. The projectile was a tungsten core wrapped in a ceramic matrix that would ablate in a specific pattern upon impact. The mathematics were complex, but the concept was elegantly simple. Create a focused stream of super-dense particles that would overwhelm the aliens' defensive systems through sheer kinetic energy rather than trying to outmatch their technology. Elena had tested the ammunition on captured alien equipment scavenged from crashed hunting pods. The results had been promising enough that a small network of human snipers had been equipped with similar weapons, spread across the globe in positions where they could observe and engage the alien hunters. Through her scope, Elena watched the Zephyrian patrol leader gesticulating to his pack. According to intercepted communications, they were hunting a group of refugees who'd fled Kabul when the aliens arrived. The leader was explaining how humans behaved when cornered, treating the refugees like prey animals whose behavioral patterns could be predicted and exploited. Elena had been in position for 18 hours, waiting for the perfect shot. Military sniping wasn't about quick reflexes or dramatic one-shot kills like in movies. It was about patience, calculation, and waiting for the single moment when all variables aligned. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the meditative state that separated professional marksmen from weekend shooters. The range was 800 meters through thin mountain air. Wind was minimal but variable, with thermals rising from the valley floor that would affect bullet trajectory. Elena made microscopic adjustments to her scope, compensating for factors that most people would never consider. The alien patrol leader stopped, consulting a device that probably detected human biosignatures or heat traces. He was standing in the perfect position, isolated from his pack mates by several meters, with no cover between him and Elena's position. For a creature that had evolved as an apex predator, he was remarkably careless about potential threats from above. Elena's fingers settled on the trigger with the practiced touch of someone who'd made similar shots under enemy fire in a dozen different war zones. She exhaled slowly, letting her body settle into perfect stillness. The scope's crosshairs centered on the alien's torso, just above where human anatomy would place the heart. The rifle spoke with a sharp crack that echoed off canyon walls. 800 meters away, Dr. Chen's carefully engineered projectile struck the Zephyrian patrol leader's personal shield and performed exactly as designed. The ceramic matrix ablated upon contact, creating a focused stream of tungsten particles that overwhelmed the shield's ability to disperse kinetic energy. The tungsten core punched through the alien's chitinous armor like it was made of paper. The patrol leader staggered, looking down at the hole in his chest with what appeared to be genuine surprise. Blue-green blood leaked from the wound as he collapsed to the rocky ground. Elena was already moving before the alien hit the dirt. Military doctrine for sniper operations was clear: one shot, one kill, then relocate immediately. The element of surprise was gone, and the surviving aliens would respond with overwhelming force to this unexpected threat. But she paused long enough to watch the remaining pack members react to their leader's death. Through her scope, she could see confusion and something she hadn't expected from such advanced predators: fear. They surrounded their fallen leader, scanning frantically for the source of an attack they didn't understand. One of the aliens activated a communication device, probably calling for reinforcement or medical support. Elena smiled grimly as she packed her rifle into its case. Let them call for help. The message they sent would be even more valuable than the kill itself. Aboard the apex predator, Admiral Kexthal received the transmission with growing disbelief. Hunting Pack 7 Alpha was reporting that their leader had been killed by human weapons. Not disabled or wounded, but actually killed by primitive chemical propulsion technology that their tactical scanners had dismissed as harmless. Replay the combat data, Kexthal commanded, his mandibles clicking nervously. The holographic display showed the final moments of Pack leader Vex Skorl's life, standing confidently in open terrain one moment, collapsing with a massive wound the next. Tactical analysis indicates a projectile weapon fired from extreme range, reported Chief Weapons Officer Kextron. The projectile somehow penetrated Vex Skorl's personal shield and standard hunting armor. Captain Vexmore studied the data with professional interest. Perhaps their weapons are more advanced than our initial assessments indicated. Impossible, Kexthal replied, but his confidence was shaken. Our technological surveys were comprehensive. Human weapons operate on the most primitive principles. Chemical expansion driving metal projectiles at subsonic velocities. Nothing in their technological base should be capable of threatening our armor. But the evidence was undeniable. A human warrior had killed one of the galaxy's most elite hunters using weapons that galactic databases classified as obsolete museum pieces. It was like being killed by a stone axe or wooden spear. Deploy Scanner Pack Beta to recover Vex Skorl's body and investigate the attack site, Kexthal ordered. I want to know exactly how the humans accomplished this. Elena had anticipated the response. Instead of fleeing immediately, she'd relocated to a secondary position overlooking the kill site. Human resistance doctrine emphasized gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities, and she needed to see how the aliens would react to their first real casualty. The recovery team arrived within an hour. 6 heavily armored Zephyrians equipped with advanced scanning equipment and escorted by a pair of floating gun platforms. They approached their fallen comrade with military precision, but Elena could detect nervous tension in their movements. Through her spotting scope, she watched them examine the body and scan for traces of the weapon used. One alien held up what appeared to be fragments of Dr. Chen's ceramic matrix, studying the ablated particles with obvious confusion. Another was scanning the surrounding terrain with a device that probably detected chemical residue from her rifle's muzzle blast. Elena had prepared a surprise for them. Hidden among the rocks near the kill site were small charges of conventional explosives. Nothing sophisticated enough to trigger alien countermeasures, just old-fashioned military demolition charges that she positioned before taking her shot. She waited until the entire recovery team was clustered around their fallen leader before triggering the charges. The explosions weren't large enough to penetrate their armor, but the psychological impact was devastating. These apex predators found themselves under attack from weapons they couldn't detect or defend against. More importantly, the explosions served as a signal to other human resistance cells. Elena's kill had been the opening move in a coordinated plan that military leaders had been developing since the first day of the invasion. Major Sarah Collins watched the signal explosions from her position in the ruins of Bagram Air Base. The former Air Force pilot had survived the initial alien assault by hiding in reinforced bunkers while alien plasma weapons turned the base into molten slag. Now she led a mixed unit of American, British, and Afghan fighters who'd refused to surrender when conventional resistance collapsed. All sniper units. Phase 2 is active. She transmitted on a frequency that alien scanners dismissed as primitive radio chatter. Weapons free. Hunt the hunters. Across the globe, Elena's shot sparked a new kind of warfare. In the Canadian Rockies, Corporal James MacDonald put a tungsten round through an alien hunter at 1,200 meters, then vanished into a wilderness that he'd explored since childhood. In the Swiss Alps, former Olympic biathlete Maria Hoffman killed 3 aliens in rapid succession before skiing away down slopes too treacherous for alien pursuit vehicles. The kills were isolated incidents scattered across dozens of countries, but their cumulative effect was psychologically devastating. The Zephyrians had spent centuries perfecting the hunt as an art form, but they'd never been hunted. They were apex predators from a world where nothing challenged their dominance, and the concept of being vulnerable to primitive enemies was fundamentally alien to their thinking. Admiral Kex Thull studied casualty reports with growing alarm. 17 pack leaders killed in the past 6 hours, all by weapons that their technology dismissed as harmless. The pattern was disturbing: single shots from extreme range, followed by immediate withdrawal. The humans were using hit-and-run tactics that denied his hunters the chance to respond or even identify their attackers. "Recall all hunting packs to orbital positions," he commanded reluctantly. "Deploy automated defense platforms around major population centers. If humans want to play games with primitive weapons, we'll hunt them from orbit where their toys can't reach us." But even as he gave the order, Kexthal felt something he'd never experienced in centuries of hunting doubt. The humans were supposed to be easy prey, but they were proving to be far more dangerous than galactic intelligence had suggested. Their weapons might be primitive, but they were using them with a skill and cunning that suggested these humans had been perfecting the art of warfare far longer than anyone realized. High above Earth's atmosphere, the Zephyrian fleet began deploying orbital bombardment platforms designed to glass entire continents from space. But in mountain ranges, forests, and urban ruins across the globe, human snipers checked their equipment and prepared for the next phase of a war that was proving to be very different from what either side had expected. Part 3 Dr. Robert Chun hadn't slept in 48 hours. In his makeshift laboratory, hidden beneath the ruins of Denver's National Institute of Standards and Technology, he worked frantically to produce ammunition that could penetrate alien defenses. The success of Elena's first kill had proven his theories correct, but now every sniper team on Earth was demanding his custom projectiles. Chin's background in aerospace engineering had given him insights into materials science that most weapons designers lacked. The aliens' personal shields operated on principles similar to meteor defense systems, designed to deflect or vaporize incoming objects through energy dispersal. But, like any defensive system, they had limitations that could be exploited by someone who understood the underlying physics. "The key is phase transition," he explained to Dr. Lisa Morgan, a metallurgist who'd volunteered to help with production. "Their shields expect conventional projectiles that behave predictably under stress. Our ceramic matrix creates a controlled ablation pattern that overwhelms their dispersion algorithms." Working with equipment salvaged from university labs and manufacturing facilities, Chin's team had managed to produce nearly 3,000 rounds of the specialized ammunition. It wasn't nearly enough to supply every sniper team requesting them, but it was sufficient to begin the next phase of human resistance. The real breakthrough had come from analyzing fragments recovered from alien crash sites. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Torres, formerly of U.S. Army intelligence, had organized teams of scientists and engineers to study captured alien technology. What they discovered changed everything. "Their materials are incredibly advanced," Torres reported during a clandestine meeting of resistance leaders held in a subway tunnel beneath Paris. "But their manufacturing philosophy is completely different from ours. They create perfect materials using energy manipulation techniques we can't even understand." The revelation was crucial. Human technology had evolved through centuries of working with imperfect materials, learning to compensate for flaws and limitations through design ingenuity. Alien technology relied on materials so perfect they didn't need the same kind of engineering resilience. "It's like the difference between a Damascus steel sword and a modern ceramic blade," explained Dr. Sarah Kim, a materials engineer who'd fled the destruction of Seoul. "The Damascus steel has internal stress patterns that make it incredibly tough, while the ceramic is technically superior, but shatters if you hit it just right." This weakness extended beyond just personal shields. Analysis of crashed hunting pods revealed that alien technology was optimized for combat against enemies using similar technological principles. Their defensive systems were designed to counter energy weapons, guided projectiles, and sophisticated electronic warfare. They simply weren't programmed to deal with the kind of brute force kinetic impacts that human weapons specialized in delivering. Major Sarah Collins used this intelligence to coordinate a new kind of resistance campaign. Instead of trying to match alien technology, human forces would exploit the gaps in their defensive thinking. It required abandoning conventional military doctrine and embracing tactics that most professional soldiers would consider primitive. "We're going back to basics," Collins explained during an encrypted video conference with resistance leaders worldwide. No smart weapons, no electronic targeting, no advanced guidance systems. Just skilled shooters with precisely crafted ammunition, fighting the way humans have fought for thousands of years. The new campaign began at dawn across 6 time zones. In the mountains of Switzerland, former Olympic biathlete Maria Hoffman tracked a Zephyrian patrol for 3 hours before taking her shot. Her target was a pack leader equipped with enhanced armor that intelligence reports indicated was supposedly impervious to human weapons. Hoffman's bullet struck the alien center mass from a range of 1,400 meters. The tungsten core punched through both the personal shield and the enhanced armor, dropping the target instantly. But instead of fleeing immediately, Hoffman remained in position long enough to engage the remaining pack members as they scrambled for cover. The psychological effect was devastating. These aliens had invaded Earth believing themselves to be invulnerable apex predators. Now they found themselves being systematically hunted by what they considered primitive prey animals, using weapons their technology classified as harmless. In Australia's outback, Aboriginal tracker Billingwin used traditional hunting techniques to stalk an alien patrol for 2 days before striking. His knowledge of desert survival allowed him to remain undetected despite the aliens' advanced sensors, and his shot from 900 meters eliminated their pack leader without the aliens ever realizing they were being hunted. The kills weren't just random harassment. Human intelligence had identified the Zephyrian command structure, and every sniper team was targeting officers and specialists whose deaths would disrupt alien operations. Pack leaders, technical specialists, and communication operators found themselves under constant threat from enemies they couldn't detect or effectively counter. Admiral Kexthal watched his casualty reports with growing frustration and fear. In less than a week, human snipers had killed 43 of his elite hunters, including some of the most experienced pack leaders in the fleet. The kills followed no pattern his tactical computers could analyze. They came from impossible ranges in terrain where sensors detected no hostile presence, using weapons that shouldn't be capable of threatening his forces. Their projectiles are somehow bypassing our defensive systems, reported Chief Science Officer Kexvith, her mandibles clicking nervously as she displayed analysis data. The metal composition is standard chemical elements. The propulsion mechanism is primitive chemical expansion, but the projectiles themselves are engineered in ways our databases don't account for. How can primitive weapons be engineered beyond our understanding? Kexthal demanded, his confidence in Zephyrian technological superiority badly shaken. The humans appear to have developed their weapons technology along completely different lines than galactic standard, Kexvith explained. Instead of pursuing energy-based weapons and smart projectiles, they've perfected kinetic systems to an extraordinary degree. Their metallurgy is crude by our standards, but applied with a sophistication we never anticipated. The revelation forced Kexthal to reconsider everything his species thought they knew about primitive worlds. The Zephyrians had always assumed that technological development followed predictable patterns. Species would develop energy weapons, guided projectiles, and sophisticated defensive systems as they advanced. The idea that a species might deliberately pursue primitive weapons technology to an advanced level had never occurred to them. Captain Vexmore studied tactical displays showing the locations of confirmed sniper attacks. They're using terrain to their advantage in ways we never anticipated. Our hunters are trained for combat in open terrain where superior technology provides decisive advantages. These humans are fighting from concealment, using natural barriers our sensors can't penetrate effectively. The pattern was clear to anyone with military training. Human snipers were operating in small teams or as individuals, using intimate knowledge of local terrain to achieve tactical superiority over technologically advanced enemies. They were fighting smart instead of hard, exploiting Zephyrian weaknesses that the aliens didn't even know they possessed. But the real shock came when orbital surveillance detected the full scope of human preparations. Deep beneath major cities in abandoned mines and natural cave systems, human engineers were constructing weapons that made their sniper rifles look simple by comparison. In the tunnels beneath London, a team led by former Royal Engineers had assembled what they called the Underground Railroad Special, a massive railgun built from salvaged subway infrastructure and powered by the city's backup electrical grid. The weapon was designed to fire tungsten projectiles the size of telephone poles at velocities that would make alien shields irrelevant through sheer kinetic force. Similar installations were under construction in subway systems, mine shafts, and natural caves around the globe. Human engineers were thinking beyond individual weapons to strategic systems that could threaten alien ships in orbit. The aliens had assumed that primitive human technology couldn't reach orbital altitudes, but human ingenuity was finding ways to extend the range of kinetic weapons far beyond what galactic databases consider possible. Elena Vasquez crouched in a new hide overlooking the ruins of Kabul, where alien forces had established a temporary headquarters in what used to be the presidential palace. Intelligence reports indicated that Admiral Kexthal himself was planetside, directing the hunt for human resistance fighters. Through her scope, Elena could see Zephyrian guards posted around the perimeter. They were taking her threats seriously now, moving in pairs and maintaining constant vigilance for sniper attacks. But their defensive tactics were based on galactic standard practices that assumed enemies would use predictable weapons and tactics. Elena had spent 3 days infiltrating the city, moving through drainage tunnels and bombed-out buildings that alien sensors couldn't effectively scan. Her route had been planned by local resistance fighters who knew every hidden passage and blind spot in the urban landscape. Her target wasn't just any alien. Intelligence had identified a senior staff officer whose elimination would disrupt the entire planetary assault command structure. The shot would be challenging even by Elena's standards, 1,200 meters through urban terrain, with multiple potential obstacles between her position and the target. But Elena had advantages the aliens couldn't anticipate. Her ammunition was Dr. Chen's latest design, incorporating lessons learned from previous engagements. Her rifle had been modified by a team of master craftsmen who'd spent their lives perfecting precision shooting instruments. Most importantly, she was fighting for her world against invaders who viewed her people as prey animals. The staff officer emerged from the headquarters building at precisely 0800 local time, following a routine that human intelligence had observed and documented. He paused to consult a holographic display, presenting Elena with a perfect shot opportunity. Elena controlled her breathing and settled into the meditative state that separated master snipers from merely skilled marksmen. The crosshairs centered on her target as she made final adjustments for range, wind, and the urban heat distortions that could deflect even the most precisely aimed shot. The rifle fired with a crack that echoed off ruined buildings. 1,200 meters away, the alien staff officer collapsed as a tungsten projectile punched through his enhanced armor. But Elena's shot was just the beginning of a coordinated attack that would change the nature of the entire war. Across the globe, human resistance fighters emerged from hiding to launch simultaneous strikes against alien installations. The age of hiding and sniping was ending. The real war was about to begin. Part 4, the coordinated strikes began at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. In London's abandoned underground stations, the massive railgun that engineers had constructed from salvaged subway infrastructure powered up for the first time. The weapon drew electricity from backup power grids across half the city, channeling enough energy to accelerate a tungsten rod to velocities that would punch through starship armor. Dr. Patricia Wells, former professor of physics at Cambridge, made final calculations for the orbital shot. The target was a Zephyrian destroyer positioned in geosynchronous orbit above Europe, its commander confident that human weapons couldn't threaten ships in space. Firing sequence initiated, Wells announced to her team of volunteer engineers and graduate students. Target acquisition locked. All systems nominal. The railgun fired with an electromagnetic pulse that temporarily blacked out power grids across London. The tungsten projectile streaked upward at 20% the speed of light, invisible to human eyes, but tracked by improvised sensors cobbled together from university equipment. 3.7 seconds later, the projectile struck the Zephyrian destroyer amidships. The ship's defensive shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and guided missiles, simply weren't programmed to handle a solid tungsten rod moving at relativistic velocity. The projectile punched through the hull like it was made of tissue paper, causing a catastrophic decompression that sent the destroyer tumbling out of orbit. Similar installations across the globe opened fire simultaneously. In the abandoned mines beneath the Rocky Mountains, American engineers launched a tungsten telephone pole at a Zephyrian heavy cruiser. In the Tokyo metro tunnels, Japanese physicists sent a projectile screaming toward the flagship of the alien hunting fleet. Not every shot found its mark. Targeting objects in orbit with ground-based kinetic weapons required precision calculations that pushed human mathematics to its limits. But enough projectiles hit their targets to send shockwaves through the alien fleet. Admiral Kexthal felt his flagship shudder as a human kinetic projectile grazed the apex predator's hull. The impact wasn't enough to cause serious damage, but it demonstrated something that terrified him more than weapons could. Humans have found ways to threaten ships in orbit using what galactic databases classified as primitive technology. "Damage report," he commanded, his mandibles clicking frantically. "Minor hull breach on Deck 7, replied his damage control officer. "But, Admiral, the projectile penetrated our defensive shields as if they weren't there." The humans somehow fired a solid metal rod from planetary surface with enough velocity to reach orbital altitude. The implications were staggering. Zephyrian doctrine assumed that primitive species couldn't threaten orbital assets. The entire invasion plan was based on the assumption that alien ships could operate with impunity from space while hunting parties eliminated surface resistance. "Recall all hunting packs immediately," Kexthal ordered. "Move the fleet to high orbit, beyond range of surface weapons." But Captain Vexmore was studying sensor data with growing alarm. "Admiral, we're detecting massive electromagnetic signatures from locations across the planet. The humans appear to have constructed kinetic weapons in multiple urban centers." "Impossible," Kexthal replied, but his confidence was completely shattered. "Our intelligence indicated they lacked the industrial capacity for such installations. The humans have been using their existing infrastructure in ways we never anticipated," Vexmore explained. "Subway systems, power grids, mining equipment. They've converted civilian infrastructure into military weapons using principles we dismissed as primitive." On Earth's surface, Major Sarah Collins coordinated the ground assault phase of humanity's counteroffensive. While railguns engaged the orbital fleet, conventional human forces emerged from hiding to strike at alien ground installations using tactics that had proven effective against superior technology. Remember, no electronic warfare, no guided weapons, no advanced targeting systems. Collins transmitted to resistance leaders worldwide. The aliens can counter sophisticated technology, but they're vulnerable to simple kinetic weapons applied with precision. In Afghanistan, Elena Vasquez led a team of snipers in an assault on the alien headquarters in Kabul. Instead of hiding and picking off individual targets, they moved in coordinated groups, using covering fire and tactical movement to overwhelm alien defensive positions. The Zephyrians found themselves facing an enemy that fought in ways their databases couldn't predict. Human infantry moved with a combination of primitive tactics and sophisticated battlefield awareness that their technology wasn't designed to counter. Squad-level coordination, suppressive fire, and tactical flexibility, skills that human armies had perfected through centuries of warfare, proved devastatingly effective against aliens trained for individual hunting rather than coordinated military action. Elena's rifle spoke repeatedly as she and her team advanced through the ruins of Kabul. Each shot dropped an alien hunter, their advanced armor useless against tungsten projectiles fired by marksmen who'd spent their lives perfecting precision shooting. The aliens returned fire with plasma weapons that could vaporize concrete and steel, but human tactics emphasized speed and unpredictability over standing and fighting. Suppressive fire advanced by bounds. Elena called out using radio protocols that predated electronic warfare by decades. Her team moved like a machine, each sniper covering the other's movement with precisely aimed shots that kept alien defenders pinned down. The battle for Kabul became a template for human resistance efforts worldwide. In Berlin, former NATO special forces used urban warfare tactics to clear alien positions from bombed-out buildings. In Tokyo, Japanese self-defense force veterans applied lessons learned from decades of disaster response to coordinate attacks against technologically superior enemies. The key was understanding that the aliens, for all their technological superiority, were hunters rather than soldiers. They'd evolved as apex predators on a world where individual skill and advanced weapons were sufficient for survival. But they'd never faced coordinated military action by species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Admiral Kexthal watched his ground forces collapse with growing desperation. Hunting packs that had dominated human resistance for days were being systematically eliminated by coordinated attacks that his tactical computers couldn't predict or counter. The humans were fighting in ways that galactic military doctrine didn't account for. "Deploy the harvester platforms," he commanded reluctantly. "If we can't hunt them individually, we'll eliminate them en masse." The harvester platforms were weapons of last resort, autonomous systems designed to sterilize entire continents when conventional hunting proved insufficient. Each platform could glass thousands of square kilometers with sustained plasma bombardment, turning living worlds into sterile wastelands. But as the platforms descended toward Earth's atmosphere, they met resistance that Admiral Kexthal had never anticipated. Human engineers had been studying captured alien technology for weeks, learning how their weapons and defenses operated. Now, that knowledge was being applied to weapons systems that alien scanners dismissed as laughably primitive. Dr. Robert Chen's team had developed armor-piercing ammunition specifically designed to penetrate harvester platform hulls. Sniper teams positioned on mountains and skyscrapers opened fire on the descending platforms using rifles that fired tungsten projectiles at velocities approaching the theoretical limits of chemical propulsion. The platform's defensive systems were calibrated to counter guided missiles and energy weapons. They simply couldn't adapt to kinetic projectiles fired by marksmen who could put rounds through targets smaller than dinner plates at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. Elena Vasquez found herself on the roof of a bombed-out apartment building in Kabul, tracking a harvester platform as it descended toward the city. Through her scope, she could see vulnerable points in the platform's hull where Dr. Chen's analysis indicated that armor was thinnest. The range was extreme, nearly 3 kilometers through desert air shimmering with heat distortions. But Elena had made similar shots in combat, and the tungsten projectile in her chamber was specifically designed to penetrate alien hull materials. She fired just as the platform reached optimal altitude for bombardment. The tungsten rod struck a critical system node that Chen's team had identified as essential for the platform's navigation system. Sparks erupted from the impact point as the platform's flight controls failed. Elena watched with grim satisfaction as the massive weapons platform crashed into the mountains outside Kabul, its planned bombardment of the city prevented by a single precisely aimed shot from a weapon the aliens considered primitive. Similar scenes played out across the globe. Harvester platforms crashed in the Alps, the Rockies, the Himalayas, and the Andes, brought down by human marksmen using weapons that predated interstellar travel by thousands of years. Aboard the Apex Predator, Admiral Kexthal stared at tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of his ground forces and bombardment platforms. For the first time in his species' recorded history, the Zephyrian hunting expedition had not just failed. It had been utterly defeated by prey that fought back with unexpected effectiveness. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It appears to be from the human resistance leadership." The message was simple, transmitted in broken Zephyrian that human linguists had deciphered from captured equipment. "Your hunt is over. Leave our world, or join your dead on its surface." Kexthal felt something he'd never experienced in centuries of hunting. The knowledge that he was no longer the predator. Somewhere on the planet below, human warriors were tracking his ship with weapons that could reach orbital altitude. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were rapidly discovering that humans were far more dangerous prey than galactic intelligence had ever imagined. The war that had begun as a casual hunt was about to enter its final, decisive phase. And for the first time since the invasion began, it was the aliens who were afraid. Part 5 Admiral Kexthal stood on the bridge of the Apex Predator, watching Earth rotate beneath his fleet with eyes that had lost their predatory confidence. In 3 weeks, his simple hunting expedition had turned into the greatest military disaster in Zephyrian history. Half his ships were damaged or destroyed, most of his elite hunters were dead, and the remaining fleet was trapped in high orbit by human weapons that shouldn't have been able to threaten them. "Admiral," reported Captain Vexmore, her voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance, long-range sensors are detecting human kinetic projectiles being prepared for launch from 17 different locations. The humans have somehow extended the range of their primitive weapons to reach our current orbital position. The revelation shouldn't have been possible. Human technology was supposed to be centuries behind galactic standards, their weapons limited to crude chemical propulsion that couldn't threaten spacecraft. But human engineers had spent sleepless weeks pushing the boundaries of kinetic weapon design, creating railguns and mass drivers that operated on principles the aliens had never bothered to study. Dr. Robert Chun reviewed calculations for the final phase of humanity's counteroffensive from his laboratory beneath the ruins of Denver. His team had solved the theoretical problems of orbital bombardment using ground-based kinetic weapons, but the practical challenges were staggering. The projectiles needed to achieve velocities that pushed chemical propulsion beyond its theoretical limits, requiring innovations in metallurgy and engineering that had never been attempted. The multi-stage tungsten penetrators are ready, reported Dr. Lisa Morgan, exhaustion evident in her voice. Theoretical velocity should be sufficient to reach high orbital targets, but we've never tested them at these ranges. The ammunition represented the pinnacle of human weapons technology, tungsten projectiles with internal staging systems that accelerated in flight, reaching velocities that alien defensive systems couldn't counter. Each projectile was handcrafted by master engineers working with materials salvaged from aerospace facilities and particle accelerators. Elena Vasquez prepared for what would likely be her final shot of the war. Intelligence had located Admiral Kexthal's flagship through analysis of alien communications, and human orbital tracking had calculated its precise position. The shot would be impossible by any reasonable standard, firing at a target in high orbit from a mountain peak in Afghanistan, with atmospheric distortion and gravitational effects that could deflect even perfectly aimed projectiles. But Elena had advantages that alien databases couldn't quantify. She'd spent years perfecting precision shooting in conditions that would challenge the best marksmen in human history. Her rifle had been modified by craftsmen who understood metallurgy and ballistics in ways that pure technology couldn't replicate. Most importantly, she was fighting for the survival of her species against invaders who'd viewed humans as prey animals. Range to target: 42,000 kilometers, reported the spotting team that had climbed to the peak with her. Atmospheric conditions nominal. Wind negligible at current altitude. Elena settled into position behind a rifle that represented humanity's response to superior alien technology. Not an attempt to match their advancement, but a perfection of principles that predated interstellar travel by millennia. The scope had been calibrated by astronomers who'd spent their careers tracking objects in space. The ammunition had been crafted by engineers who understood materials science at the atomic level. Through her scope, Elena could barely detect the alien flagship as a glint of reflected sunlight against the star field. The shot required calculations that pushed human mathematics to its limits, accounting for orbital mechanics, atmospheric refraction, and gravitational effects that most snipers never considered. Target acquired, Elena reported to the Global Resistance Network. Around the world, similar teams were preparing for simultaneous shots at the alien fleet. Not all would hit their marks, but coordinated fire would overwhelm whatever defensive systems the aliens still possessed. Elena controlled her breathing and entered the meditative state that separated master marksmen from merely skilled shooters. The crosshairs centered on a point in space where the alien flagship would be when her projectile arrived, factoring in orbital velocity and the complex physics of extreme-range shooting. The rifle fired with a crack that echoed across mountain peaks. The specially designed projectile streaked upward through Earth's atmosphere, its multi-stage acceleration system activating at predetermined altitudes to boost velocity beyond what chemical propulsion should have achieved. 47 seconds later, the tungsten penetrator struck the apex predator amidships at a velocity that turned solid matter into plasma. The alien flagship, which had survived centuries of combat against enemies using advanced galactic technology, was destroyed by a single shot from a weapon that galactic databases classified as primitive. Admiral Kexthal died without understanding how humans had achieved the impossible. His last thought was confusion at how creatures using primitive chemical propulsion weapons had somehow extended their range to orbital altitudes, using principles that Zephyrian science dismissed as obsolete. The remaining alien ships found themselves under coordinated bombardment from across Earth's surface. Human rail guns fired continuously, launching projectiles that reached orbital targets with precision that defied galactic understanding of primitive technology. The aliens' advanced defensive systems, designed to counter energy weapons and guided missiles, proved useless against solid tungsten rods moving at relativistic velocities. Captain Vexmore, now commanding the remnants of the fleet from a badly damaged heavy cruiser, made the decision that no Zephyrian commander had ever faced: retreat from primitive prey that had proven deadlier than any enemy in galactic history. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace, she commanded, abandoning military protocol in her desperation to escape human weapons that operated beyond alien understanding. Retreat to home space immediately. But the humans weren't finished. As the alien ships prepared for hyperspace jump, ground-based installations launched their final salvo, projectiles timed to intercept the ships at the moment their hyperspace engines activated. The combination of exotic hyperspace physics and kinetic impacts created catastrophic failures that destroyed 3 more ships before they could escape. The surviving vessels, less than a quarter of the original hunting fleet, fled into hyperspace carrying news that would reshape galactic understanding of primitive worlds. Humanity had defeated apex predators using weapons that galactic databases classified as museum pieces, demonstrating a level of tactical sophistication and engineering innovation that challenged every assumption about technological development. Elena Vasquez stood on the mountain peak, watching alien ships disappear in a hyperspace. The war was over, won not through technological supremacy, but through human ingenuity applied to principles that had guided warriors for thousands of years. Precision, patience, and the kind of tactical innovation that emerged when civilizations spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare. Major Sarah Collins coordinated global resistance forces as they emerged from hiding to begin the process of rebuilding. Earth's cities lay in ruins, its military was shattered, and billions had died during the invasion. But humanity had proven something that would echo across the galaxy for generations: that technological superiority wasn't the only path to military victory. Status reports from all sectors Collins transmitted to resistance leaders worldwide. Begin recovery operations and casualty assessment. The aliens are gone, but we have work to do. Dr. Chun emerged from his underground laboratory to see sunlight for the first time in weeks. His ammunition had proven that human materials science, applied with sufficient creativity, could overcome technological advantages that seemed insurmountable. The principles he developed would revolutionize human weapons technology, ensuring that Earth would never again be vulnerable to technologically superior invaders. In the months that followed, word of humanity's victory spread through galactic civilization like wildfire. Species that had considered Earth a primitive backwater suddenly reassessed their assumptions about human capabilities. The humans who defeated the legendary Zephyrian hunters using obsolete weapons became the stuff of galactic legend. The Galactic Council, which had dismissed Earth as too primitive to merit membership, found itself facing a species that had demonstrated military capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of technological warfare. Human ambassadors arrived at galactic installations carrying weapons that looked primitive but had proven devastatingly effective against advanced alien technology. The humans appear to have perfected kinetic warfare to a degree that threatens even our most advanced defensive systems, reported the Council's Military Analysis Committee. Their weapons operate on principles that our technology wasn't designed to counter. Elena Vasquez returned to her childhood home in Montana, her service in the Resistance War earning her recognition as one of humanity's greatest military heroes. But she remained a simple soldier at heart, more comfortable with rifles and mountain hunting than with the galactic politics that Earth's victory had thrust upon the human race. The rifle she'd used to kill Admiral Kexthal was displayed in the Smithsonian Museum as a symbol of human resistance. But Elena knew that the real weapon hadn't been the tungsten projectiles or ceramic matrices. It had been the human capacity for innovation under pressure, the willingness to find new solutions to impossible problems. Standing on her family's ranch, watching elk graze in meadows that had almost been glassed by alien bombardment, Elena reflected on the lessons of the war. The aliens had possessed superior technology, but they'd lacked the one advantage that humans had developed through millennia of conflict: the understanding that warfare was ultimately about will and innovation rather than pure technological capability. Somewhere in the galaxy, the surviving Zephyrians were reporting to their superiors about the impossible defeat they'd suffered. Earth would no longer be considered easy prey, and humanity had earned a reputation that would make even the most advanced species think twice before threatening human worlds. The invasion that had begun with alien laughter at primitive human weapons had ended with humanity demonstrating that sometimes the oldest principles were the most effective. Elena smiled as she cleaned her rifle with the same care she'd learned as a child, knowing that the galaxy would never again underestimate the humans who'd turned hunting tools into instruments of victory. The war was over, but the legend of the human snipers who defeated an interstellar empire with primitive weapons would echo across the stars for generations to come. And in that legend, future enemies would find a warning that technological superiority alone was never enough to guarantee victory against a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of warfare.